Today's event is in honor of National Imagine a Day Without Water. And I really hope that none of you ever have to live in those circumstances. And as you'll hear from some of the presentations today, there are a lot of people in the world and even in the San Joaquin Valley who are not imagining a day without water because they have no water, but fortunately there's services available to them. As you probably have read through some of the materials we've sent you, we're looking forward to showcasing and showing you all of the research activities and projects that are part of projects related to Fresno State. We hope that you learn a lot from all of the presentations and that you get to know some of the projects going on. We also included in your email a packet that includes a description of all of the projects that we presented today, as well as information on the speaker and their email address if you would like to speak to them again. We have a very full agenda, and you will have presentations that are 5 to 7 minute in a lightning round style. So there is very little time in between the presentations, but we provided all of the email addresses of all of the speakers so that if you have additional questions, you are able to reach out to each of the presenters. We will go ahead and get started with the first presentation from Kate Wilcox. And Kate will be speaking to you. We'll try to answer a question for all of us. And the question is, can post-fire sediments be used to restore hydrological, geomorphic, and ecologic process of degrading meadows in the Southern Sierra Nevada? Kate, the Zoom stage is yours.
Okay, good morning. My name is Kate Wilcox, and I am a geology master's student. And I am doing a post-fire meadow restoration project in the Sierra National Forest in partnership with the Pacific Southwest Research Station, which is a branch of the U.S. Forest Service. Meadows are very important ecosystems in the headwaters as they provide habitat for many native fish, amphibians, and birds. They also act as sponges, absorbing water and also storing carbon. When flooding flows from storms and snowmelt spill over the channel banks and onto the meadow floodplain, the water slows, fine sediment is deposited, and then water infiltrates the meadow substrate, raising groundwater levels. Meadow vegetation relies on this fine sediment and high groundwater levels, and in turn, their thick roots act as a protective barrier against erosion for the meadows. As snowpack in the Sierra Nevada diminishes, more water will come down as precipitation and will move through those systems quickly instead of slowly throughout the summer as snowmelt. Meadows may be able to help mitigate this as they capture those winter flood flows and then release water more slowly throughout the year. So these saturated environments also act as fire breaks, as well as store more carbon than surrounding forests. However, due to disturbances such as overgrazing, road building, and also intentional draining, many of these meadows have become degraded. A number of factors, including the overgrazing, can break up that protective meadow vegetation, and then the streams erode downward in a process called incision. It's estimated that over 50% of meadows in the Sierra Nevada are incised. So channel incision dries out the meadow landscape in a negative cycle by draining the water table and then preventing flooding flows from spreading over the meadow and recharging that lower groundwater table. Conifers and other upland species are then able to encroach on the meadow floodplain, and that habitat for native species is lost. Meadows can then also shift from carbon sinks to carbon sources. So further threatening mountain ecosystems, fire size and severity is also increasing. High severity fire is classified by most of the vegetation and litter being removed, and this leaves landscapes vulnerable to erosion. And because meadows are incised, that sediment just shoots right through them into streams, lakes, and reservoirs below, which can degrade those ecosystems and also infrastructure. But what if we intercepted that post-fire sediment before it ended up in reservoirs and riverbeds and captured it in the incised meadow channels that are lacking in sediment instead? We propose installing restoration structures such as beaver dam analogs, also known as BDAs, in the meadows. BDAs are human-made structures that mimic beaver dams. They're semi-permeable, made of woody material that's primarily sourced on site. They slow flows and can capture that fine sediment in the pools that form behind them. By building many of these throughout the channel, we could capture the post-fire sediment that comes down in these winter storms. So looking back at that same diagram as before, as the incised channel fills with sediment, the groundwater table would also be able to increase as it is no longer being drained. And during flooding flows, the water would then be able to spill across the meadow floodplain, recharging the groundwater in a positive cycle. Meadow vegetation would be able to recolonize, increasing habitat. So to test this, we selected 3 study meadows in the Sierra National Forest. Lower Grouse and McCreary meadows were burned in the 2020 Creek Fire, and Ahart is our unburned control. We selected these meadows because, as you can see, they're all deeply incised, and Lower Grouse and McCreary had severely burned catchments. To understand restoration's effectiveness in the burned and unburned meadows, we collected a suite of pre-restoration, hydrological, ecological, and geomorphological data. The purple shapes are the meadows, the outlines of the meadows, and within them we established 5 transect lines where wells were drilled. That's what the green circles represent, and those monitor groundwater fluctuations throughout the year. We also did vegetation surveys along those transects. Each of the meadows is also installed with gauging stations, which are represented by these orange triangles at the inlet and outlet of each of those meadows, and they're monitoring the flow that's moving through the meadow and then also the sediment that the streams are carrying. We also measured topography of the channel as well as grain size and the geomorphology of the channels. The project is just a part of an overall larger project, and I'll be focusing on the sediment transport through the meadow. So I am using the suspended sediment and flow data that is being collected by the gauging stations I mentioned before. We expect to see that more sediment will be transported in the burned than the unburned meadows, just because there is so much sediment available to be moved. And then we also expect to see that the amount of sediment eroded from these hill slopes would be enough to fill the incised channel. And then post-restoration, we expect that more sediment will enter the meadow than leave it, because the BDAs will be capturing that sediment within the channel. Future work is that we plan to restore the meadows at the beginning of November, a little late, but we're hoping to restore Lower Grouse and McCreary and Ahart, and we are really excited. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. That is such timely project, and we look forward to hearing from the next phase of your project as you develop and go through it. If you have any questions for Kate, if you would like, you have 2 options. You can email her at the email in the program, the email she showed on the screen, or you can also use the Q&A function on Zoom. And then Kate, if you mind staying for a little bit so that you can answer any questions that might come up in the Q&A section. Thank you. And now we're moving on to the next presentation from Elijah Banda. He will be talking about the San Joaquin Valley Water Collaborative Action Program. Elijah, the Zoom stage is yours.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura mentioned, my name is Elijah Banda. I'm a project coordinator for the California Water Institute, and I'm here to talk about the San Joaquin Valley Water Collaborative Action Program, or CAP for short, which is the latter part of it, the Collaborative Action Program. And so we are currently working on an action plan for sustainable water resource management in the San Joaquin Valley. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and talk a little bit more about it. But this is no easy task, as some can imagine. But over the past 2 years since its inception in August of 2020, we have grown to over 70 participants from a variety of backgrounds. And so I'll kind of walk you through just a little bit more about the program itself. Okay. So the CAP, or the San Joaquin Valley Collaborative Action Program, was the idea of Tim Quinn, water policy manager in California for over 40 years. And a lot of this work started with a paper he wrote while a fellow at Stanford University, which was entitled 40 Years of California Water Policy, What Worked, What Didn't, and the Lessons to Learn Moving On into the Future. So it kind of focused on past water policy that California has had to deal with, the present, and then what we can expect in the future, you know, if changes were not made, how we can help, and so on. But yeah. So moving on, as I mentioned, as I mentioned, this original collaboration was started by representatives from Fresno State, Stanford, and a variety of stakeholders. The original Uncommon Dialogue was held at Stanford as a virtual event on September 21st, 2020, and it was co-chaired by Buzz Thompson and Natalie Swearengin, who both in and of themselves are very outspoken individuals and care a lot about the San Joaquin Valley, have high interests in water, and just would like to see our area continue to grow and flourish as it has. And so that original Uncommon Dialogue had over 50 participants, and almost every single individual who attended had something constructive to say and wanted to see it grow and wanted to help contribute to the overall idea that was being discussed at that meeting. So as I mentioned previously, now we have over 5 different stakeholder groups involved in the process. So we have safe drinking water advocates and disadvantaged community members, environmental NGOs, local government representatives, farmers and the ag industry, and water agencies. So as you can imagine, all of these individuals have something unique to bring to the table. And so this program is trying to bring each one of the stakeholders' problems, possible solutions into one group so that we collectively can go out to government officials to show what the program has to offer. So now CAP has gone on to engage more stakeholders to build relationships of trust. They are very fond of open communication and believe that that is one of the major stepping stones into creating a very successful collaborative program. And they are very inclusive. You know, no problem is too big or too small. And each one of the groups has something important to say. So that is a crucial part of CAP that we would like everyone to remember, you know, as a program continues to grow. So now, as I mentioned, we have a primary plenary group, which is made up of over 70, now it's over 80 individuals. And so each one of those, you know, has something constructive to say. And then we have a smaller steering group, which is made up of 10 members, 5 delegates from each one of the caucuses with 5 alternatives. And so the steering group helps set agendas for the plenary group meetings. They help, you know, write important documentation to share with legislators and things like that. And so this decision-making process was approved by the plenary group last year in June. And the goals of it are to come as close to unanimous consent as possible, individuals do not make the decisions for CAP, the caucuses do. And so it takes caucus approval or collaboration in order to move forward with a given project. And then in order to move forward in general, all caucuses must be supportive of the CAP vision or be neutral in order to continue on. And so right now, CAP is led by its management team, which is comprised of Tim Quinn, who was the Stanford University Water Fellow, Laura Ramos, who is the Deputy Executive Director and works here at the California Water Institute, and then two facilitators, Jim Waldo and Jim Kramer, which help lead the CAP Collaborative Action Program to be successful in moving forward with the solution areas that we're coming up with. And finally, some of the solution elements that this group has come up with are listed right here and briefly. So we have safe drinking water, sustainable water supplies, ecosystem restoration, coordinated changes in land use, and effective implementation. Each one of these is related to the 5 caucuses, and each one is going to be looked at in more depth for possible solutions moving forward. But that's just a little bit about CAP, and I hope it was very informative and interesting. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Elijah. Yes, it was very informative. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have some questions for Elijah, you can use the Q&A function on Zoom, or his email is in the program. So following right along, we have 2 presentations from Florence Castle. The first one is comparative yield and nutritional quality between forage sorghum and corn. Florence, the Zoom stage is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Florence Castle. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Plant Science. And today I'm going to share 2 research areas that I've been involved in over the past few years, which involve actually the same crop, which is sorghum. And particularly, I'm going to talk about water management, which is my area of expertise. So this first project was actually conducted by master's students in the Department of Plant Science, and it compared the agronomic performance of 2 forages, corn and sorghum, in terms of their yield and nutritional quality. So why studying forage in general? It's because when we look at the California crop production, we see that forages are grown on about 2 million acres. And why that is, because California leads the state in dairy production. So we produce about 19% of the milk in the country. And so we need a lot of dairy cows for this production. And within the state, we actually, the dairy is the top commodity before even almond or any other crops. We also are the fourth producer in terms of meat production. So with all these economies, and then we need a lot of forages to raise the animals. So our 2 major forages in the state are alfalfa and corn. So they are traditionally being grown because of their high nutritional values. But some of the issues that have arisen, particularly following the drought and some of the water shortages issues, is that they use a lot of water and they tend to be sensitive to salinity, which is becoming a problem because we tend to pump more and more water, and the water that we pump is more and more saline. So this brings us to this alternative forage, which is a sorghum. So why looking at sorghum? Because it is more drought and salt tolerant. Now, we don't know sorghum too much in California, but it is grown worldwide. It's the 5th cereal grown all over the world, and particularly because it is very adapted to dry environment. And it can be it can maintain its physiological activities under a lot of stress. So this is why one of the reasons why we chose sorghum. And actually, maybe 7, 8 years ago, within California, there was actually a kind of a push to try to reinstate sorghum in the rotation. And there are a few research programs being conducted at the UC, as an example, that looks at sorghum. And most of this stem from all this drought that we have been experiencing over the year. So looking at this project, so the student focused on the comparison of corn and sorghum, and she did a field experiment, pretty complex, looking at different irrigation regimes and nitrogen rates. And then we looked at a lot of parameters, but today I'm just going to concentrate on yield and the nutritional quality, which will be the protein content and the fiber content. We also looked at a lot of different other factors, such as water use efficiency, nitrogen use efficiency, but I'm going to skip that. And if you really need some information, just let me know. So our approach was a split plot where we combine 3 different irrigation rates. So drip irrigation at full water requirement, furrow irrigation, which is really applying water through the rows. And then we deficit irrigated the crop by 30%. And then we apply 4 different rates of nitrogen. So these are all the different measurements we conducted during the studies. We had, of course, one thing to notice, you see that nice harvester. We actually collaborated with the UC Cooperative Extension out of Kearney, and they were nice enough to lend us their harvester. So these are all the analysis that the student conducted. And so the result that we got, I tried to summarize that in simple terms because we got a lot of data. But if we look particularly at the effect of irrigation on the yield of corn and sorghum, we saw that corn usually produce lower yield than sorghum for all the different irrigation regime, and this happened for both year. In general, we saw that when the crop was really stressed, like when sorghum was really stressed, it performed much better than corn. So this was the case in the second year. We had like a real kind of drought condition. It was the year also when we had the fire, so very low radiation. And so that really affected the corn, but the sorghum performed quite well. So overall, we saw that the yield of sorghum was better than corn. And we saw the same effects for nitrogen. So the sorghum responded well to different nitrogen rates, and as the nitrogen rate increased, the yield increased for both crop. But we can see that though, something to notice, we tend to always let's say fertigate or apply fertilizer in all our systems. And here we found that the maximum yield that we could get was at starting at 150, and adding extra fertilizer didn't contribute to additional yield. So that was a major finding to trying to reduce the amount of nitrogen applied, which could contribute to groundwater contamination as well. And so when we looked at the nutritional value, what was expected, sorghum, why it hasn't been really grown as much is because it tends to have lower nutritional qualities than corn. And this was evidenced here with the protein content. So we also observed lower protein content with the sorghum, although we saw that increasing the nitrogen rate contributed to increase in the protein content. This is what you want also for the animal, for the energy of the animals. And then the fiber content. So this is something we try to reduce as much as possible to increase the digestibility of the forage. And so we saw that the fiber content was higher on the sorghum, which was expected. So overall, we found that sorghum outperformed corn in terms of yield. We also saw that sorghum was less stressed than corn when it was really put under harsh condition of lower water applications. We observed that fertilizing at a rate of 150 was enough to produce a maximum yield. Overall, we can say that sorghum could be used as an alternative to crop when you are in situation of water shortage or when you have salinity, and you could feed this forage to like low energy diets or animal that are like dairy heifer or dry cow. They require less energy, and so sorghum could be used for that. So that's the end of my first presentation.
Yes, thank you, Florence. And it's great to see that we're bringing and studying different crops to bring into California to have options for the rotation, such as sorghum. And so speaking of sorghum, her next presentation is lissometric determination of crop water requirements for sorghum.
Yeah, so here it is. Okay, so this actually leads well into it. So as you have seen, so we did this study on sorghum and corn, and one of our major problem was to figure out or to kind of predict how much sorghum, how much water we needed to apply to sorghum, because we don't have too many data on the water requirement for sorghum. We can find it. We could use soil sensor. We could use aerial imagery, things like that. But this just tells you what is happening now in the future. What we need to do is to predict beforehand for the season how much water we need. And so this leads to this second study that I have been conducted. Actually, it's part of a broader program which looked at updating the crop water requirement and the crop coefficient that helps you predict how much water to apply during the season or during a particular month. And also it helps us to schedule irrigation, means applying the right amount of water at the right time, really able to be timing it so that we reduce the stress. So because everything we do let's say in irrigation management is to try to reduce the stress, not just monitor when it happens, but we want to not even have stress occur. Okay. So this is so we looked at in the past different crop, and now we are focusing on sorghum. And so how do we conduct our experiment is to look at a water balance approach where we use some instruments that are called lysimeters. They are considered to be the most reliable technique to measure water use in crops. And so they are based on this concept that we have a measurement of evapotranspiration, precipitation, hopefully runoff. We don't have too much, but we can measure it, and then a change in soil moisture. So we use all these parameters to try to deduct the crop water requirement, which is really referred to as evapotranspiration. Okay, and from evapotranspiration, we can also derive what we call the crop coefficient. And so that's really a factor that tells you how much water the crop is using in relation to a reference, which is grass. So here, so this is this was the background on the why studying, let's see, forage sorghum. Okay, so this is the setup that we had in the field. So this was conducted at the West Side Field Station at the UC Cooperative Extension site. So we have one field that has a lysimeter. So a lysimeter is really a large soil tank that's placed in the ground. So if you see here, this place in the ground, and we grow the crop in that tank. And underneath the tank, actually the tank sits on a scale. And what we do is that we measure daily changes. Actually, it's more than daily, it's hourly changes in the weight of the tank. And these daily changes represent the amount of water that has been lost by the box or by the system, by the crop. So this is what we did this summer. So this is on sorghum. So here as the crop is growing. So we also took, in addition to taking the measurement of the change in weight in the box to relate to crop evapotranspiration, we also took some picture from above ground to determine the ground cover, and we related the ground cover to the crop coefficient. And why we did that? Because of course, in terms of practicality for a grower, it would be impossible to conduct these studies all the time. These are very time consuming and expensive, but we try to find a parameter which would be easier for the farmer to grow, or to measure or to acquire, and relate that to a crop coefficient value. So these are the data that we obtained. So these are from this year. Actually, we ended the season about a few weeks ago. So the blue line represents the crop. So over the season, so it was a 120-day crop, and we saw the water requirements in millimeter per day. So this represents the crop, the sorghum, and the orange line represents the grass. And we measured the grass ET, which is called the reference ET, from a CIMI station that we have just on site. And then for when we divide these two numbers, we get this green line, which is called the crop coefficient. So later on, whenever we get this line, we can use that for future studies, or like a grower could use that to predict the water requirement of its crop. And particularly, we compare that with some published data from the FAO. And of course, those data were developed like a long time ago on the floods, so different irrigation practice. And we saw that they tend to overestimate the amount that needs to be applied, which is understandable because the irrigation system is flawed. Here we irrigated our crop with a subsurface drip system, where the evaporation component is much less under those conditions. So we found that the total amount of water needed for this particular crop here was about 870 millimeters. So we let the crop run a little bit longer because we wanted to see how the crop was going to behave. And then we saw that the peak ET for a particular day was about 6 millimeters per day, so 0.23 inches of water per day. And then we found that the top maximum KC was around 0.9, which is lower than what is reported. And also these are the pictures that we took over the season. You can see the progression of the crop, and it grows really, really fast. We plant that in June and then harvest in September, October. And you can see like in a few days, the plant goes, in a matter of 2 weeks, the plant goes from this stage here to this stage. So it's a really fast growing crop. And so this here shows the relationship between the KC and the ground cover. And this is something that the farmer can use to try to estimate water content or the water requirement of the crop. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I guess this is part of a larger program. So we looked at different crops, and this is just sorghum, but this is some information that's really important for a farmer to predict for a season how much water would be needed. So I think it was a large effort. It seems to be simple as a project, but it's very hard to implement. It requires the expertise of a lot of different people. But it was, we got some good data overall, and we are going to reproduce that next year.
Thank you, Florence. Thank you for those two great presentations. Our next presenter is Keomine Vang. He will be speaking to us about the use of bioinoculants for enhanced salt and boron tolerance in broccoli and romaine lettuce, integrated with variety levels of salinity. Keomine, the Zoom stage is yours.
So my project is the use of bioinoculants for enhancing boron and salt tolerance in broccoli and romaine lettuce. And these will be irrigated with a variety of levels of salinity, which is basically salt water is basically what we're irrigating the plants with. I work with the Center for Irrigation Technology. I'm also the APP program director and a research program manager for the Center for Irrigation Technology. This project is actually in partnership with the USDA and also in partnership with the private company Intrinsic Bio, which is one of the sponsors that is helping us with the inoculation formula for the seedling and the saplings. Of course, the problem is because we call it continued drought, but it's actually just our new normal is what I would like to think of it, because after years of not having enough water, not having irregular weather patterns, I believe that this is just our regular weather pattern now. Also, weather patterns are irregular, so we're not going to get normal water patterns anymore, and we have to understand that that's what we're living here with in California. We're also don't have water supplies. We don't have enough storage. Our facilities here are also limited and dated. Our water supply infrastructure hasn't been upgraded for over 60 years. And on top of that, the water quality that we do have that we're able to drill and pump out is high in naturally occurring salts and also other chemicals such as boron and saline. This is especially true in the west side of the Fresno and also the rest of the Central Valley. If you look at the graph on the bottom left there, that is San Luis Reservoir. And you can see the changes in the levels within the last couple of years. 2021 was the lowest, and we're at about there again in 2022, meaning we don't have enough water and we're not going to be getting enough water. So we have to be more creative in how we use the water supply that we do have and how we're going to be more using whatever available water there is. We do have a lot of brackish water or not high quality water. So these maps are showing on the right there is the map of salinity levels of soils within the Central Valley. There are a lot of soils that are not able to be farmed because the salt concentration in the soil is too high, and a lot of the crops that we grow here cannot tolerate it. And again, and then the map in the middle is actually from drilling companies showing gas and oil fields where they're drilling and finding different quality waters within the Central Valley. And so there is water here, it's just poor quality water beneath the surface. So the purpose of this project is to find ways to be able to better utilize the poor quality water and poor quality soils that we have within the Central Valley. Because a lot of these soils and a lot of these areas are fallow due to the fact that we can't use or grow anything on them. Drilling companies have identified that, there are saline water within a mile deep of the surface and, a couple thousand meters, kilometers of aquifer water available. But again, this water is very high in salt concentration, saline, and also boron. So we have to find alternative crops to use these types of water. The objective of this project would be to create or find alternative crops that can use this type of water. How we do it is basically we inoculate the seedlings, which when we do that, a microbe is added to the seedling, and the seedling creates cracks within the seedling, resulting in better endophytic bacteria in the plant, which allows the plants to better use and tolerate salt or saline and boron within the crop. The left hand side there's a picture of what I'm talking about in the seedling itself after they grow. And then on the bottom left there's a control and lab testing broccoli there, of course. And the reason why we're doing this type of studies is Dr. Gary Banuelos, our partnership at the USDA, he's been doing studies about different crop tolerance, different crops that can tolerate and can be grown with high saline water. So this is just one of the alternatives. And in this project, we're looking at particularly just broccoli and lettuce, and we're going to be treating them with the microbes and then identifying how they function afterwards. The methodologies, we have about 60 of these tile lysimeters. This is out at Parlier in the Parlier station of the USDA. We also have another station at the UC Cooperative Extension in Parlier. These lysimeters here will be filled with clay soils, and then each of them will have a different treatment. But then the water, so we have different concentrations of boron, salinity, and salt in each of these. The drain tiles are basically a giant cement tube, goes down several feet, maybe down to 5 feet. They'll be filled with clay. The original soil here is sandy loam, so we don't want to infect or cross-mix the soil, and that's why we're doing it this way. So we'll have different soil types as well as different concentrations of salt water within the experiment, and this will give us a variety and give us a duplication as well.
1 minute.
Basically, market analysis is to be determined because this is a new project. We just started planting, and then we're working with Dr. Todd Loney in the ag department, and he will be doing the market analysis once it's complete. And this is our references. And If you're interested, we have upcoming webinars for our APEP program, and there's the QR code. If you have any questions, feel free to let Laura know and they shoot it over to me.
Thank you, Kaomine, and we can also share that the event link for your APEP upcoming events. Thank you for sharing that information. Moving right along, we have Anita Chaudhry from, she's actually from Chico, but she is a partner in a Fresno State project. And the PI wasn't able to be here today, so she graciously agreed to present to us about a project that she's working on. It's Sigma compliance, spatial and operational consistency across the San Joaquin Valley groundwater sustainability agencies. Anita, the Zoom stage is yours.
And thank you to the previous presenter. I was going to raise my hand and ask a question because that was perfect segue, because we have this research on a salt tolerant variety. And oftentimes, you know, the questions come up about the ideas that are coming up or being tested in the labs. Are they scalable? Are they going to actually be part of a policy-wide solution to the drought problems that we're going to face, not just in California, but everywhere? And I think that was kind of the starting point for us in this project. I'm Anita Chaudhry. I'm a professor of economics at California State University, Chico. And this project has a really long title, but it really looks at how is Sigma coming through the San Joaquin Valley, right? And I'll walk you through some of the components there. We just started this fall, so I don't have any results to share yet, but I'll share with you the big picture of how we conceived of the project and what we're going to be exploring in these 2 years we're going to work together. And towards the end, I'll share with you who the team is. I'm the co-PI on this project, Dr. Steve Blumenschein. He is not available today because he's traveling for work. He's the PI for this project. So what you see on your slide in front of you, and let me actually do full screen mode, so you see it even bigger, is our study area. We have our 5-county study area of Madera, Fresno, Tulare, Kings, and Kern County, which is the core of the south central San Joaquin Valley. This is where the groundwater overdraft is one of the most severe in California. And as you can see in the map, those pink colored basins are the critically overdrafted subbasins. And this is a map I grabbed from just recently released DWR's update on groundwater levels. You can see that the San Joaquin area and the Tulare Lake Basin, they are some of the most, the areas that had the worst groundwater trends over 20 years, right? So there is in drought, groundwater levels go down. We expect that because groundwater is like our saving account. We withdraw more from it when, you know, rains are less, precipitation is less. But in a longer term trend, if our bank account is depleting, it's a big source of concern, right? So in 2014, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which kind of is in the title of our project, was passed. And it's coming into force, as most of you here know. We really are working on different aspects of water. It's coming into force in 2020 or 2022, depending on the basin. And communities and basin members have to work together to bring their basin into sustainability. So we're seeing a sea change in how water is going to get managed. And a lot of the solutions that are being mentioned in the presentations today are going to be really useful. And we need to think about how scalable it's going to be, all of these solutions. Just to kind of do a really quick connection with the global problem of groundwater aquifer. So what you see in front of you is a map that I grabbed this morning from a very interesting study that looks at groundwater overdraft or the state of groundwater aquifers around the world. So you see the Central Valley, like here in California, right? This is our aquifer system right here. And it's in the darker yellow and orange colors tell you that that's where most of the overdraft is. But that's not a problem unique, unfortunately, to California. A lot of regions of the world, all the way in South Asia, in Western Europe, or in Eastern Europe, North Africa, Saudi Arabia, and a lot of these places, as you can see, are also the ones that are producing the food for the world. So we have a real challenge about running out of our saving account and how are we going to feed the population, how are we going to maintain the ecosystem And with climate change, you're going to have more droughts. So this is a major issue. So what California is doing is a really interesting experiment in designing community level and basin level sustainability programs. And we want to move, as this is John List's quote, we want to move from a mentality of creating evidence-based policy to one of policy-based evidence. So in this project, what we want to study is this mode of managing groundwater going to be scalable to other cases, right? So we're going to study how these groundwater sustainability plans are coming through and whether they're going to work as a scalable solution for the rest of the case studies. So I'm going to share with you in the next couple of slides our big schematic on our objectives. So our first objective is really to see how these GSPs, which are the groundwater sustainability plans, why have they been deemed incomplete so far, right? So we are really seeing it play out in real time. And a lot of these GSPs that were submitted were deemed by the regulator, the Department of Water Resources, as incomplete. Why was that, right? So we want to understand that in a very data-based way. And we want to understand, were these reasons randomly distributed, or were there some specific reasons about the condition of the aquifer, the nature of agriculture, the number of white areas in the communities and the basins? Was that systematically related? Our second objective is to look a little bit closer in a high resolution way to what degree are individual stakeholders within the sustainability programs and agencies actually engaged. And this is actually a really big question for everybody engaged. Why might in some basins the community may not be engaged? What are the barriers to engagement? Is it information? Is it communication? Or are there other social and political economy barriers? So this is a really interesting social science question that comes into play when it comes to managing water, right? And finally, I think I skipped over that one slide that had the third one, right? This last one, the objective 3 that you see at the end. What we're going to do is we're going to do a survey of our entire community in each of these 5 county areas and try to aggregate these factors in coming up with these barriers. So hopefully by the end of the project, we'll have knowledge that is generated from community communications in what those barriers are, and hopefully that'll help inform the process going forward. And my last slide here is the pictures we could gather of our team. We have a very diverse, strong team. That's Stephen Blumenschein here, Lida Shoaib, Paige Gilligan, Don Wright, and the pictures I don't have, but 2 of these people are on the call right now, Elijah and Laura, and Jackie Taylor, another fantastic graduate student from the project. If you have any questions or suggestions or comments, I'm all ears.
Thank you, Anita. And if you do have any questions, you can email Anita or put them in the chat right now. We really appreciate you joining us and subbing in for Steve. Our next presenter is Andres Jauregui. He is going to be speaking to us about the capitalized aesthetics value of stormwater retention basins on house prices in Fresno and Clovis. AJ, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate this opportunity. Hope everybody can listen to me clearly. What I will be presenting today is a project that it's actually a continuation of another project that has been already published recently. So this is in collaboration with my 2 colleagues from the Craig School of Business, Chin Fan and Jacqueline Curry. So what we're doing here is we're looking at the impact, the house price impact of certain aesthetic characteristics of the stormwater retention ponds on house prices, right? And so we have little literature in the real estate literature that looks at the impact of how stormwater retention basins that collect water, right, for several purposes, right, how they capitalize into house prices. And so that has been an interest of us. We published this paper back into 2021 where we're looking at the a few characteristics, basically how completed the ponds are in the stage of their construction. And so we find that properties located within 200 feet of the basin, they sell at about a 5% discount relative to the ones further away, right? And the literature seems to find negative impacts. There's a few other papers that do that as well. And so we are now having more information on the characteristics of the basin. So we're taking advantage of that and going further with another project. So the idea here, the theoretical framework that we're kind of using is that, things that are close to a property, like parks, like stormwater retention ponds, like rivers, creeks, things that may attract people for recreational purposes, or that they have, certain uses, have both benefits and cost. And so in the net benefits could actually be negative if you're really close to, or if you're close to, those features. And as you get further away, the benefits could, become, the net benefits could become, positive, as you can see in the slide here, right? And so we are trying to model our, house prices based on this model, okay? And so what we have, this is the traditional hedonic price model. It's been pretty established in the literature. And so what we're modeling is simultaneously the house price and days on the market, and on a bunch of characteristics related to the housing characteristics, neighborhood characteristics, and the stormwater characteristics, right? And I'll talk about that in a second, right? And so this is our empirical modeling, okay? What we have is data from the multiple listing service from Fresno and Clovis, right? From 2017 through 2021. So it's recent transactions that have taken place. We have about 36,000 observations throughout this years, with an average price of a little bit above $300,000, a little bit less than 1,800 square feet is the average size of the house, 3 bathrooms, 2 bathrooms, 3 bedrooms, a little less than over 40 years on average, right? And they have stayed on the market for about an average of 70 days, right? We also control for financing variables, so whether they use cash or they used a traditional mortgage or they used an FHA mortgage. We also control for several other housing characteristics, like the type of roofing, and several other characteristics, right? And then we also control for the stormwater retention basin variables, which I will explain in a second. Okay, and so here's the samples of the stormwater retention basin. So we got information from, we work closely with the Fresno Metropolitan Flood Control Districts to collect information on the characteristics of the basins. And so we have information on whether the basins have been landscaped or not. When you have a development that is being built, they have to pay a fee where that development is located based on a basin that they're going to be, located in. And so in that fee, they collect, they separate, or they have some, portion that is dedicated to landscaping. Not all of the ponds, all of the basins are landscaped. Some of them are, some of them are not. And that's where it's given us a way to measure, differences, right? We also have information on whether the retention basins are, either just stormwater retention, right? So just holding water, whether they're recharge, recreation, they have dual action, or undetermined. So we follow this as a characteristic of designation, right? Okay, so what I do is we map all of the transactions, the 36,000 transactions, and we measure distance from each of the houses to their closest stormwater retention basin based on landscaping, and all that kind of stuff. So we have information on that we can use in our regression analysis. Okay. So here are the results. Okay, so we take in the regression where we have house price on the left-hand side of the equation and the bunch of characteristics on the right-hand side of the equation. And we are now ready to look at how is it that proximity to the different stormwater retention basins, ponds, they have an impact on property prices, right? And so when it comes to landscaping, we can see that properties that have a front yard view, right, to the landscaped stormwater retention bond, they sell at a premium of almost 8%, 7.39%, right? For the ones that have a backyard view to a non-landscaped stormwater retention pond, we see that they have a premium of 3.16%, right? So in this case, for the landscape ponds, what matters is that they have a view to the pond, right? This is consistent with some of the literature that is finding that, aesthetic value of your curb appeal of the property and the one in front of you also has, an impact on property prices, right? And so, so when it comes to distance, so we're finding that the closer you are to a landscaped stormwater retention pond, the higher there's going to be the discount, okay? So that means that if you're considering, in this case, the policy or the consumer implication is that properties located close to a landscaped have a higher discount than the ones that do not have any landscaping. And the reason is because, again, landscaped stormwater retention basins, they look prettier, but they're busier. They may have a park, they may have people coming by, and so that creates more nuisance, creates more traffic, and therefore that could negatively affect property prices. These are the results for the designation. What really matters in this case is probably not easy to see, is distance to the dual agencies, to the dual stormwater retention ponds, right, have a negative impact, and some of the other ones as well. So you can see that designation of the stormwater retention basins also have an impact on property prices. Okay, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, AJ. And sorry, we're running a little behind schedule. We're going to try to get everybody back on schedule. So moving right along, we have Eve LaRocci Pinelli, and she's going to talk to us about measuring grapevine water status using Landsat 8 satellite images. There you go.
Thanks, Laura. So my name is Eve LaRocci-Pinel. I'm French. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Viticulture and Enology, and today I'm going to talk about the use of Landsat 8 satellite images to measure the variability in grapevine water status. So the water status of the vine, what we actually look for is a moderate water constraint to increase the grape quality, so trying to increase phenolic compound in the grape. But with climate change and the increase in heat wave and decrease in water availability, we are gonna decrease the quality of the grape by increasing to match this compound and also decreasing the yield. And how to adapt to that? There is a different way. So the growers can adapt the grass in the interrow or change the harvest date. We can also think about implanting other variety or changing the plant density. And of course, we're gonna think about water management. So trying to prioritize the area we need to be irrigated or determine the critical periods also. But to do that, we need to actually measure the water status in space and time. And the perfect tool to do that is remote sensing. And an example is satellite imagery. So remote sensing is able to actually measure the amount of light which is reflected by the vegetation. And here is an example of a spectra of a vine leaf. And here you're gonna have the amount of light reflected by the leaf in a different spectral domain. So in the visible, we're gonna assess the information about leaf pigments such as the chlorophyll. In the near infrared, we're gonna assess information about the cell structure. We have also some information about the water content. And in the shortwave infrared, we have more water-bound absorption, as well as information about the leaf biochemicals. And all of these parameters can be actually affected by the water content in the plant. For this study, we use a Landsat 8 satellite, which has a temporal resolution of 8 days. So that means it always passed above the same location every week. With a spatial resolution, so the size of the pixel are 30 meters for some bands and 100 meters for the thermal band. So the spectral resolution, what I'm talking about, the bands, we have 3 bands in the visible, 1 band in the near infrared, 2 bands in the short wave infrared, and 2 bands in the thermal domain, which is actually temperature. For this project, a vineyard in Bakersfield has been studied during 2020 and 2021. And the study has been based on several experimental units based on the satellite pixel, and several measurements has been performed from May to August. The first measurement was actually to measure the water status of the plants with in-field measurements such as the stem water potential or gas exchange. Grapes has also been sampled and analyzed in the laboratory to measure the weight of the berries, the pH, Brix, or acidity. For the method used in the study, we actually extract the information from the images which had been acquired at the same time that measurement had been performed. We extract all the value of the different bands and also performed vegetation indices, which are actually a combination of different bands. We use, of course, the measurements, the field measurements, so different information about water status and grape composition, and also data from the environment, so weather data with the max temperature and the minimum relative humidity. For the analysis, we have approximately 300 data. We are checking the correlation with a linear correlation between the Landsat images and the in-field measurement. And we are also looking for non-linear correlation using machine learning models. So the first result here is a correlation matrix. So how we read this is the bigger the points and the darker the color means a higher correlation, and the dark blue circle means a high positive correlation between the both value, and a dark red means a high negative correlation. So first, what we can check is the correlation between the water status measurements and berry composition. So what we measured here is the higher the water stress, the smaller the berry are and the weight, so which means a decrease in the yield. The higher the pH is going to be, and the higher the Brix, which means more sugar and more alcohol in the wine. And we also decrease the acidity in the berries. Then, if we check the correlation between the water status and the band reflectance, we can see a positive correlation between the stem water potential and the B5, so the band in the near infrared, and the negative correlation with the B10, which is the thermal band. Now, if we check the correlation between the same measurements, but with the vegetation indices, we can see a strong correlation between the same measurement, the stem water potential, with the moisture stress index, the normalized difference moisture index, and the green normalized difference vegetation index. Here is the plot of the best vegetation, which is the most correlated with the stem water potential. So here we can see the distribution of the stem water potential value. So the more negative we are, the more is the water stress. And this index is actually the formula is just the reflectance in the sphere divided by the reflectance in the near infrared. We are still analyzing this data, and the next step is the exploration of some machine learning model. But the conclusion of this study is that we actually assessing the vine water stature is for sure crucial to manage the production of vine grapes, especially in the context of climate change. And for that, remote sensing is a powerful tool to monitor the vegetation in space and time. And this first example with satellite, we know this imagery can help growers to actually apply and change their practices to adapt climate change. And in 20 minutes, Kyla is going to also talk about another project using a drone. So thank you for your attention. And if you have more, if you want to learn about all the other projects we are working on, you can scan this QR code. And I just want to thank the lab I'm working with and all this fantastic team I'm working with, because all the projects we have will not be possible without help of the graduate and the undergraduate students. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Eve, and we look forward to hearing about the next steps of your project. Moving right along, now we have Jingyun Lee. He's going to be talking to us about the impacts of hydrochar amendments on water retention capabilities of agricultural soils. Welcome, Jingyun. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Jingyun Lee, and my presentation topic is impact of hydrochar amendment on the water retention capacity of the agricultural soil. And here is the outline for today's presentation. California Central Valley is one of the world's most productive agricultural regions, but now the Central Valley is facing the crisis of the water scarcity in the agricultural soil. Here is the reason that caused the scarcity of the agricultural soil water. Today, I will focus on the limited water retention of the soil and its portion solution. And conventionally, the soil texture and the soil amendment are the key components that determine the soil water holding capacity. We use the new soil amendment. Hydrochar has been proved that it can potentially improve the soil quality. And this type of the char byproduct is derived from the wet biomass by the hydrothermal carbonization, with the selected biomaterial being heated to between 150 to the 300 degrees in the presence of water under the high pressures. The hydrochar used here was produced from the food waste kindly provided by the University of South Carolina. And this study explored how the addition of the hydride affected water retention capacity in the Luzon soil experiment. Our test guide explored how the presence or absence of the hydride affected the temporal variation of the soil moisture and the potential head with the depth, the distribution of the soil moisture with the water potential head. For the soil experiment, the sample soil was used a mixture of the 80% dry sand and the 20% of the topsoil. And we used the equipment from the meter glue ink to measure the water content and the potential head. And there is some dimension information for the soil corn. The first 30 centimeters of the corn was filled with the soil, and the remainder of the corn connected to the irrigation device, and the sensor will insert in the two sides. And in the schematic diagram, we can find the sample soil was rolled every 10 centimeters into the corn, totally 3 layers. And the corn filled with the sample sandy soil, but without the hydrogen, which was used as the control. Another corn was filled with the same soil as the white corn, but with the hydrogen. In the top centimeter layer, 250 milliliter water were added before the water content was measured. Will be with soil and discussion. This figure shows the comparison of the water content between the hydrogen mixture and the poor soil in the top layer. This figure clearly shows the highest soil water content was found in the soil content the 8% hydrogen. There is the figure I zoom in to show more clearly. The result in the water content of the hydrogen mixture at the 3.5 centimeter depth is higher because the smaller gap between the particle of the hydrogen mixture, which can hold water in there. In addition, the result in the water content of the poor soil is higher at the 9 centimeter depth. The reason is because of the higher water permeability of the sandy soil that let the water flow into the next layer rapidly. And this figure shows the compression of the water potential head in the top layer between the hydrogen mixture and the poor soil. This figure clearly shows all the potential head of those two sample soil can get to 0. But when we review the zoom-in figure, the potential head in the soil without the hydrogen increases more rapidly because of the high permeability. And this figure shows the relationship between moisture and the potential head in the top layer. Here, the arrow bar represents the standard deviation. The soil mixed with the hydrogen inhibits the greatest potential head when the water content is sent across the various depths. Examining the figures, the slope of the all hydrogen mixture soil is clearly higher than the poor soil. It means the 8% mixture, hydrogen mixture has more potential to load the water when the same moisture increases. This provides strong evidence that hydrogen can indeed enhance the water retention capacity of the soil. The conclusion is the addition of the food waste hydrogen as the amendment to agricultural soil boosts the soil moisture level and increase its water retention capacity. This finding was confirmed by the soil experiment, which clearly showed the improved water retention achieved in the amendment sandy soils. Overall, the result of this study provide essential steps that will contribute to the ongoing effort to develop the hydrogen technology as the way to produce the useful and effective amendment for the agricultural soil. And we will investigate the movement and distribution of the nutrient in the unsaturated zone with the hydrogen in the future research. And this research project is funded by the National Science Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jingyun. That was a very interesting presentation. Moving right along, next we have Robert Lowell. His presentation is titled Water is Life, the Centrality of Water in Science and Nature Documentaries. Robert, the stage is yours.
This is a little different here. This is actually some exploratory research. So a project that I'm more focused on looks at closed captioning data files. It turns out that you can actually extract text files out of closed captions from online streaming services. And so for about 2 years, I've been using these streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, et cetera, to build a massive database of what essentially is scripts from science and nature documentaries. And so I compiled all these different award ceremonies along with the BBC Natural History Planet series that many of us are familiar with, like Planet Earth, compiled a massive database of what I would consider to be like the blue chip documentaries that have come out in this space since 1993. And so for this project, what I built up was a database of 609 different programs that combined give you over 3 million words. So essentially what we have here is a library. It's like going into a library and being able to just smash all the books together and then extract themes over time or just themes across time from the works that you're interested in. So I use this software called Luke. I'm not going to go into details about it, but it lets you look at a number of dimensions of language use. What I'm really interested in for the primary project is how language indicating collectivism has increased over time. And then also some suggestions that the storytelling in these shows has actually improved over time. But that's secondary to this project. So for this project, I figured, well, I've got all this data. Why don't I just smash them all together, generate a word cloud, and see what the most consistent themes, the words that show up the most frequently in these science and nature programs are. And I expected this. Words like life, earth, people, years, time, stuff that you would expect to hear in almost every documentary. I figured water would probably be up there, maybe in like the top 10 to 15, but I didn't suspect it would be among those top 5 there that I have right there at the top. But as you can see on your screen, that is in fact a word cloud of almost 3.1 million words across 30 years of science and nature documentaries. And we see that other than the word time, the word water shows up the most. So we have 6,157 instances of that word showing up in about 88% of these documentaries. Not sure which ones don't talk about water. I guess they're there, but I don't exactly know which ones they are. But I think this is really interesting. A little bit more of a theme than I really expected, which of course plays into my title. Water is in fact life, and we see it when we smash all these programs together and extract themes from them. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to highlight a few of the programs to show you the ones that feature water the most. That is, in the largest proportion of their overall script, the word water shows up. So unsurprisingly, a fantastic documentary called H2O, the Molecule That Made Us, is really the leader. The number 1 example is the second episode with the highest density of water use in its script. And then you also see there the first and third episodes are also in the top 10. We have an older Jay-Z documentary where he goes to Africa and helps build water systems that actually had very high density as well. A brand new series or a show from the Nature series from PBS called The Elephant and the Termite, which has a very high density. Flint water crisis, PBS documentary a few years ago, not surprising there. A pretty big picture documentary from 10 years ago called Last Call at the Oasis. You get the theme here, right? Wild Africa, about, of course, Africa. And then Our Planet, which was a really great Netflix series released 3 years ago. Water shows up throughout the series, but the episode Freshwater, it turns out, has the highest water use for that series. So just think this is kind of nifty exploratory stuff that comes from a really unique database that I have. So in my slides, I actually give you homework. So in my science communication classes, I have my students keep documentary journals. I can't make you do that. But if you're watching this or if you're looking at these slides, I really implore you to take some time and watch one of these. I'm an expert on this stuff. I've watched probably 250 science and nature documentaries. So here at the end of these slides, I give you some recommendations. The H2O documentary is great. As Fresno State affiliated people, we actually get free access through the links that I provide. The best documentary of all time, as far as I'm concerned, is Blue Planet 2. This nightmare fuel that you see on your screen is one of the incredible creatures that you would see if you watch The Deep, which is the best episode. The Green Planet is a brand new PBS BBC show. Really fascinating thing about The Green Planet is that the episode Seasonal Worlds came out in July, featured the Central Valley more than any other region on Earth. It was on the show for 13 minutes, which I think is pretty fascinating. And then two great movies, both obviously about water in various forms or as a source of life, Chasing Ice and Chasing Coral, also Chasing Ice available through the library credentials. So again, exploratory stuff. It's just like, hey, you got a cool data set, see what comes of it. And it turns out that what comes of it is we see even more so than perhaps we thought water is life, as demonstrated in these docs. So if you got any questions, let me know and I will cede the floor.
Thank you, Bobby. That was an awesome presentation. That was fascinating with everybody. So moving right along, next I have Amanda Maldiv. She's going to talk to us about drawing our water and water awareness visual journals. Amanda, the stage is yours.
Thank you for indulging me. Those of you who've seen some of this before, I'm kind of trying to reinvigorate some of what I do with students in water civics in my classes. So a lot of this is going to be some repetition, but I've been trying to rethink, like, how do I bring this back into what I'm doing? And I know some of you haven't seen it. So I teach in English, and part of my job is preparing future English educators who are going to be out working with our secondary schools. And I don't know how many of you know, but English teachers are actually charged with and supposed to come out of our program able to teach civics. We're supposed to be able to teach students they're supposed to be able to teach their students how to participate as citizens in our communities and our democracy, need to understand our national documents, things like that. And so one of the things I've been really interested in is I got involved as an unofficial member of the water cohort doing the water read early on at Fresno State, and started integrating this into my classes. And so one of the things I do is comics and graphic novels. And so I brought that into it. And so my main goal is to help students be better literate contributors to and participants in our community around issues of water. So thinking about how water science moves beyond scientists, and I was really excited to see Anita's project, thinking about like, what's going on, in terms of getting this out and thinking about it more broadly in the communities. The water documentaries work, thinking about how water impacts real estate, because all of these are reaching beyond into audiences that are not just scientists or farmers, but thinking about everyone in our community. So visual stories are really helpful because they engage us experientially and aesthetically. That is, because it's aesthetic doesn't mean that it's not factual. It simply means that it's giving you another avenue through which to experience things. This is why scientists use graphs and charts and photographs, because those visuals are really important ways to convey information. So I have students actually do a kind of scientific process where they're, and these are all examples from my students' work as they were working with folks around water in our community. I have them read about water science, observe and reflect on their personal water usage, interview water stakeholders, have conversations and do additional research, and then present to their peers in visual forms along with an annotated bibliography. And what I'm trying to integrate going forward, and I love make connections with any of you that are interested in this, is bringing this the next step to having students actually engage in some civic participation and potentially service learning, maybe with some of the organizations that you all are involved with or the farmers that you've been connected with. So the very first step of this that I wanted to emphasize today is the work that they do around observations of their own water use and their own, every time their life touches water as they go about their day, trying to pay attention to it. This seems really basic, but it's a really important step in actually establishing a baseline of facts about how water is part of our lives. And from that, everyone has that shared experience that they can then move forward and understand better the kinds of policies, infrastructure, et cetera, that are affecting the ways that water touches their lives. So they might start with notes that they may turn and process and translate into a visual. And in translating it into the visual, as many of you know, there's a lot of thinking that goes on. And what do these words mean? How do I represent them? How do I convey them to somebody else? And they really integrate that learning. So here's a number of their water journals, the visual parts of them as they translated their notes into documenting what they did. And they said this was a very simple exercise that I had them do. Some of them did it through photos that they took during the day. That probably was the most impactful thing that I did with students because they had just never paid attention. They hear about water, but they don't pay attention to it in terms of their own lives. So they invest some time into really paying attention and thinking about this is what scientists do. They observe, right? They look for patterns. And then we looked across the class at patterns in water use. And we had some like a data set to look at. So we read and discussed accessible water science articles and excerpts, literature with a water focus, watched a few documentaries. Thank you for the piece on documentaries just now. And did independent research. And then they interviewed stakeholders. And I'm only gonna talk briefly about this, but they talked to dam director, farmers, low-income parents who are struggling with water bills, residents of towns with bad water they can't drink, water policy staff with the county, Fresno City water utility staff, immigrant families, talking with them about what was water like in Mexico? What was your experience of water use there? Landscapers, and professors at the university. And then they came up with ways to report back about this work. And what was cool is that a lot of these interviews turned into conversations. So in the listening, in being listened to, then there was a listening that went back and forth and sharing each other's perspectives. So talking to a farmer and hearing what they thought about environmentalists and portraying that, but then and then learning from them about really what happens with water. My students learned a lot about irrigation, about the water cycle, about storage. And then there was actually conversation, and you can see it portrayed here in ways that like, okay, I'm listening to you, you're speaking. And she actually was asking him, would you use recycled water? Would you drink recycled water? Because she had learned that it was safe to do so. And other kinds of, they learned a lot about different kinds of things that have happened in the valley around trying to save water. You can see here a lot of representation about scientific knowledge on the page, and bringing it back in the end to daily life. So what does this mean for each of us in terms of paying attention to what's happening with water in our communities? Water bills, this is one about a single parent. Their water got cut off, so they had to go buy all their water. And so in the end, what I'm hoping to continue to do with my future teachers of English language arts is have them think about civics literacy, and in particular, water being an area of very concrete civics literacy through which students can learn about how to engage in their communities and policy making about water, but eventually about all kinds of things. So through going through a series of very scientific and actually we do this in all of our disciplines: observations, research, conversations, analysis, and then the storytelling reporting piece. And then hopefully moving into perhaps some civic learning, civic action, service learning, civic action, and starting to think about how they're going to integrate this civics and water literacy into their own work as English language arts teachers. So that's what I've been working on and thinking about. Thank you.
So thank you, Allison. I just got a great idea on a potential project. So you're going to be hearing from me in the next.
Okay, please do.
Moving right along. Next, we have a presentation from Susan Milrohi. We have Preserving the Natural Hydrologic Cycle. Everyone has a role and responsibility. Dr. Milrohi, the stage is yours.
Hey everyone, good to see all of you here. I'm happy to be presenting here, and nice to hear everybody else's presentation. So today I want to bring out some attention to the important role of water, which has been nicely emphasized here in my colleagues in prior presentation. But I want to begin with the importance of recognizing water as a human right and being proud of the fact that we do have that as a bill in our state, officially recognizing it as a human right, and we just need to do what we can, to uphold that right. And also at global level, access to safe water is regarded as a basic human right and affront to human dignity, as highlighted for years by previous UN secretary and those after him, as well as the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment we have in California. We recognize the need for upholding this as human right. I want to also highlight here the availability of fresh water globally, how many regions of the world, overall are in water stress or scarcity status. So highlighting the importance of that. Of course, the blue areas, it could vary. This is by country. So region-wise, as we know, in California, we'll be in more yellowish area, but at country level is different. So I want to highlight the fact that looking at how much water we have, so I'm sure all the documentaries that were nicely highlighted and the reflection journals, keep that in mind as well as a motivation, how much water we have, fresh water. You see that on this slide, 2.5% of the global fresh water is available. A lot of it is in ocean. And then from that, we have some that is not readily available in glaciers, ice caps. We have some of that in surface water, some of that, a majority of it in groundwater reserve. And then from that, you can also go further and break it down into the percentages of the fresh water, how it is distributed in terms of lakes, the ice, permafrost. So the point is we have limited supply of fresh water and we need to be mindful of our usage. The hydrologic cycle here shows the movement of water. So we normally say, okay, we have a cycle, the water cycles through the atmosphere, and in the documentaries that we can look forward to look at, I'm sure, these will be highlighted. How much do we lose, for example, to evaporation? How much are we going to lose to evapotranspiration from the land and the plants, vegetation from the ocean? We have some losses, and then of course the changes in weather patterns, the climate change, all of these are going to impact, and they are impacting how soon or how quickly the water reserve replenishes, because we have the groundwater and the surface water sources. I'm going to go very quickly through my slides, mindful of my time, hoping that visually I can capture the ideas. So how do we use our water? We have different uses: public, domestic, irrigation, power generation, industrial, mining, livestock, aquaculture, so many different uses that we have. And then where do we use most of it? That will give us idea, where do we need to focus, keeping in mind, our conservation measures, our abilities to innovate and make changes. So for example, the surface water we use a lot in energy production, irrigation, public supply, groundwater. And this is at the United States level. Again, by states, this can vary. Livestock, we use groundwater a lot. And then for residential uses, for example, we know for residential uses here in our semi-arid region or arid regions, landscape makes up a big majority of the usage. So then that gives us an idea, where can we focus on, how much, think about our own usage, reflecting on our own usage. For example, we know generally average person uses about 100 gallons, but you can do it with much less than that. So you have to keep thinking about these measures, to conserve and save. How also our food production requires water. So here's some things to think about. For example, 674 gallons, to produce 6 ounces of beef, because feeding livestock, as I showed in the earlier slides, uses a lot of water as well. That's part of it. The crops that we produce, keeping in mind the importance of these food products to our region as well as globally, and the need for water. Rice 73 gallons, almonds 483 gallons. So the food production requires a lot of water, so we have to keep in mind our practices. Also here I want to highlight the current state as of October 20th. We have some data showing that, keeping in mind how groundwater is an important resource for us, we have 64% of our wells that we monitor to look at the hydrologic cycle, the input of water in our water reserves. We have 64% that are below normal level. So, and we have some decrease in the level of our groundwater, as you see with the most recent data we have. So we need to be mindful of this. And also looking in the future, water management planning, we have a call to reduce the assembly bill, achieve 20% reduction in our urban per capita, so per person usage. We want to reduce it, so we have to think about our own ways or in our own residential communities, how we can achieve that. So for example, beginning January 1, 2025, we want to establish greater, or that is our goal, greater of 52.5 gallons per capita daily. So reducing by 20% reduction, and further, gradually reduce further and further our usage. So where do humans fit in the cycle? We can do a lot. I put it in this diagram. The human uses, we use the water supply, we use the water from surface, from the lake, streams, from the ground, and then we put it back, from the production processes, different processes or uses, put it back as wastewater. So we need to be mindful of what goes on in between, as we change or intersect the cycle. What can we do? We can eliminate water waste and use water conservation measures. You see, for example, irrigation consumes a high percentage of the uses in home, for example, leaking faucet, the landscaping, use a drought tolerant landscaping. We must also not forget that wasting food is wasting water. So recently there was an article in New York Times highlighted, in fact, the company in Centro La Familia in our region was also taking measures, to make sure food doesn't go to waste. Knowing how much water goes into producing food is important to recognize at personal level and community. We are wasting water if we waste food. Same with energy, for that matter. If we waste energy, we're wasting water. So as our roles as humans in the hydrologic cycle can be and must be positive, we must save, protect, conserve, and innovate. Here, example of innovation is what we're looking in the future. You mentioned, one of earlier presenters mentioned a student asking, how people feel about wastewater being turned into water for them to drink. That's exactly what we have here in Southern California. Actually is a very good pure water, good tasting water that I myself have tasted it and have visited. So this is example of innovation and what we have to do looking in the future. Let's remember our global challenges as well: sustainable development goals, responsible consumption, production levels, and also think about personally have an active role as a water protector and consumer, being thankful for what we have, also asking ourselves, did I do my part to help save and protect our water? And thank you for your attention. I think I made it to my time.
Yes, thank you for such a great presentation, especially in such an important day as, imagine a day without water. So we are running a little bit late. We have 2 more presentations and then a special message from our provost, Dr. Fu. Moving right along, we have the next presentation is Kayla and she's going to be talking to us about remote sensing of grapevine water status using hyperspectral camera mounted on an unmounted aircraft vehicle. A case study. Kayla, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So as you said, my name is Kayla Vasquez, and I will be talking about some of the innovative techniques that we're trying to integrate into water management in a vineyard setting. So I'm working with the Department of Viticulture and Enology, and this is where I am a graduate student at Fresno State. So as we all know, and we've talked about a lot today, water insecurity has really continued to impose some production limitations and some environmental limitations on both a regional and global scale. So as a result, some of the remote sensing has become a really valued solution for adequately budgeting water supply by identifying some spectral and spatial information within a block to better manage these things. The variability of information in a block can be classified and used for management of some resources. The current California water situation has become a key driver for agricultural innovation and the need to have sustainable resource management. And each year we start to see more mechanization, automation, and in general, smart technologies in the vineyard. And this just becomes one more thing in the toolbox for budgeting water. These things are particularly evident in the San Joaquin Valley, which is where all of us are pretty much located. And this is due to some of the widely planted grapevine that has now been given scarcely allocations of water. So the general scope and aims of my project are to understand some of the spectral signatures and grapevine of a grapevine canopy at variable irrigation rates. We then correlate some of the spectral information to pressure bomb values, which is a tissue sampling for ground truth purposes. And then also to understand how some of these estimations can be implemented into water management at various growing stages. So we began a study in Cabernet Sauvignon vineyard in the San Joaquin Valley. We have installed an automated irrigation system, and we created 12 watering zones for randomized replicates, each irrigated at a different duration from 100 to 40% according to a grower allocation. The spectral and spatial information across all of these zones was collected throughout the growing season using the near infrared and shortwave infrared hyperspectral imaging with the wavelength range from 900 to 1700 nanometers. This is all based on an unmanned aircraft vehicle, which is also known as a drone. As water has a high absorption rate in these domains of wavelengths, we can attempt to use this information to detect the areas of extreme water densities, and so then we can assess the plant water status at variable levels. The remotely sensed data is ground truth with plant tissue, as I mentioned, and these measurements were taken bi-weekly from June to harvest using midday stem water potentials. So these are some of the tools that we use to fulfill the project. For creating irrigation variability, we use the Verity irrigation automation system. To do this, we had to implement a secondary irrigation line, and for every one device, we were able to create 2 irrigation zones as the device is able to work in 2 directions. So in total, the whole experiment had 24 devices, so 48 different irrigation zones. In each of the irrigation zones, we of course took field measurements so we could build a data set for ground truthing. And in each of the zones, 1 leaf was taken from 4 vines. The method was midday stem water potential, and we measured these in bars or PSA. The leaves were bagged about an hour before the measurements as a fulfillment of the technique. And this is done within a 3-hour window from 12 to 3 p.m. so that we can achieve the highest stress of the plant. So just a general workflow of how we did the project. The general workflow of how we did the project here, of course, you implement the irrigation, we collect the data, and we put it in for analysis. This is an example of some of the imagery we connect. We begin segmenting the data, and we can extract the canopy out of the images to get the information from there. We then get a spectral signature in radiance. We can convert it into reflectance, and these values will be averaged and used to compare with stem water potential averages. From here, we'll be able to make better management decisions by understanding the variable differences in the block. And once we do that, we can actually apply them into a system of how we manage. The study is in a premature phase, so we have not conducted the full extent of the project, but the results are so far promising, and we hope to continue acquiring and analyzing some of this data. And of course, I'd like to thank my team. Without them, it wouldn't be possible for such a big data project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Kayla, it sounds like a very big project. And so moving right along, next we have Keomine Vang. He's going to talk to us about agriculture water efficiency and pumping assistance program for small farmers in the San Joaquin Valley.
All right. And I'm Dr. Keomine Vang, and I work for CIT, and I run the APEP program, and this is a kind of an offshoot of our APEP program. So our APEP program, our Advanced Pumping Efficiency Program, has been in operation for over 20 years. We test usually pumps over 40 horsepower or more every 2 years or so. The idea behind it is it's a multi-level program providing education, resource management, and energy conservation with water conservation for growers. We've tested over 20,000 pumps and had over 400 or 500 seminars within the last 20 years. The problem with the program, as I go along here, is that, the United States Department of Agriculture states that 72% of the farms in the United States are considered small farms, which means that they're all about 100 acres or less. California Farm Bill estimates that, there's 84% of the 67,000 farms in California are small farms. Our program serves its purpose, but our program doesn't help with the small farms, because funding for our program is to cover 40 horsepower or larger, and most of these small farms, they don't have a motor bigger than that. Also, we provide education, but our education is really open, but it's really hard to reach these growers because a lot of these growers, they don't have access to these programs or knowledge of these programs, and so it's really hard to reach them. That's one of the things that why we're having this program, is to focus primarily on them. And of course, they have highly specialized crops. A lot of their crops are, specialty crops, such as for Southeast Asians, for instance, they sell, long bean, bitter melon. These are very highly specialized crops with a highly specialized population. The need, a lot of small farmers can't really afford to upgrade their systems or have inefficient designs. So working with the small farmers, what we notice, or what I've seen, is that they have systems that are antiquated, or they lease or their land. So they can't really afford to redo or rebuild these systems. They spend lots of money on electrical bills. They can't really afford even to run their operations because their electrical bill is so high, especially now with PG&E rates doubling from 5 to 8, and then they don't have efficient systems, so they're running their systems all day long and causing them to they can't even afford to really manage their farms. A lot of them are running 2-3 acre plots, and they're trying to manage it and run it as efficiently as they can, but they're not making money because they don't have enough water. The biggest thing we see right now is they just don't have enough water coming out of their pumping systems. And like I said, a lot of the Southeast Asian farmers, they lease their land. They don't even own it, so they can't even get proper testing. They can't even get the wells re-drilled or fixed. And a lot of the Latino growers that I've seen and worked with, they have small farms, or sometimes they're doubling their home well as their farming well. So they're it's doing double duty. So they can't afford to build and be inefficient with their designs. This program is to help them get better hardware, including pumping systems, make sure they're managed correctly, and also provide research and education, provide them access to this information and knowledge that we have, that we provide for larger growers. But the larger growers, or the Wonderfuls and the the citrus growers and almond growers, these guys all have access to these programs. So they're updating their systems, they're making it more efficient, they understand the technology out there. A lot of these small growers, especially the hard to reach groups, they don't have access to this information, or they don't know much about it. So it's our charge to help them gain better access to the education and research resources. We work with PG&E, which has a tool lending library, which is totally free for anybody within their territory to use anything that's within their tool lending library. You just have to shoot them an email, and then there's a cost of shipping. But other than that, you basically get to use whatever tool like flow meters, soil moisture sensors, or other sensors for free. That's one of our partnerships. And our goal is really to help 500 farmers test over three years, the next 3 years. So this program is a 3-year program, and we're trying to reach out to hard to reach growers. Been going on the radio station. We're going to create TV spots on the Latino and Spanish speaking radio stations and on TV to kind of promote the program so we can get out there and reach out to a bigger audience. 3 services, pump testing. We give a subsidy for $250 for each pump test. It just can't be tested within the last 3 years, and anything less than 39 horsepower to about 5 horsepower. We believe this covers a lot of the small farms, because a lot of small farms that we've gone to and looked at, it's about 10 to 15 horsepower motors. And of course, we provide education, and we also working with other agencies to help them design and innovate their systems. Eligibility, again, less than 40 horsepower, must be for agricultural use. Can't be to repair or take out a non-operational. It can't be for real estate and transaction. So that's our requirements for that. Future plans, we're actually working and partnering with the USDA and NRCS and their sweep programs to kind of help the small farmers, and working with the UC Cooperative Extension on another program, which we will be doing field evaluations, identifying new technologies, best management practices, and we're going to be working with small farmers, showing them how these technologies work, helping them, teaching them how to install proper installation, how to check their fields, check their crops, identifying information that they can have. So a lot of these small farmers, they meet in small groups and community groups. We're trying to work with these community groups so that we can reach out to these groups and help them the best that we can, because it is a hard process, and it is a confusing process at times. Again, PG&E has a tool lending library that we're gonna use to help these growers. They loan it to the grower for free. They can reserve the tool. They go on there, they get the tool, and then once they're done using it, they can ship it back.
Caroline, 30 seconds.
Yep, and this is our upcoming seminars, and I am done, and that's my contact if you have any questions.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Fu. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Thank everybody today to be here to go through this invaluable experience of imagining a day without water. As we know, water is one of the most important life essentials for humans and all other life forms. It is hugely important, and it will become more and more important with the climate change, population growth, and the higher demand and the needs for food and other products that keep human life possible. And the Central Valley, as we know, we are at the center of the agricultural production. We provide a significant proportion of the food supplies and vegetable fruit supplies to the nation. We are literally one of the largest, if not the largest, centers of agricultural productivity and farming in the world. So Fresno State takes a very important strategic position as a regional and a national university. And we recently restructured CWI, the California Water Institute, and we are elevating its importance. So I'm very happy that we are living up to our tradition and hosting activities like this one. And CWI is charged to advocate, promote, educate, and research on anything water. anything related to water. I came late, but the two presentations that I heard were really interesting and inspiring. And I thank all our faculty, staff, students, interested community members who gather here to honor our student staff and honor the great efforts of CWI administrators, staff, and the faculty are providing. Thank you, and I wish you a successful day for the remainder of this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fu, for those kind words. And last but not least presentation, we have Elijah Banda. He's going to talk to us about drinking water outreach. Elijah?
Yes. Okay. So as Laura mentioned, I'm going to try to move through this very quickly. But this is a drinking water outreach program called the California Partnership for the San Joaquin Valley. More specifically, this is work being done by the Water Work Group. And so I kind of just want to plant a question in your guys' mind as we kind of move through this very quickly. So now on National Imagine a Day Without Water, could you yourself imagine a day without water? You wouldn't be able to brush your teeth, take a shower, flush the toilet, take a drink of water if you're thirsty, or even in some cases, prepare a meal. On a larger scale, firefighters wouldn't be able to put out fires, hospitals wouldn't be able to function, and then many businesses would have to close because water isn't available. While it seems almost unimaginable, living without water is an unfortunate reality for many individuals in the San Joaquin Valley. During the last drought, there were families that ran out of water because their wells went dry and were not aware of public services that were available. On to the next slide. If it's like the bird, there you go. So during phase 1 of the Water Work Group, members focused on creating a suite of outreach materials that consisted of an outreach plan, a website that houses a list of resources available, and marketing assets. As I mentioned earlier, during the last drought, there were many families that ran out of water and were not aware of resources available for them. The Water Work Group wanted to ensure that there was one simple message that all of the counties used. This message is that if you run out of water, resources are available. To make sure the message was shared, CWI developed an outreach plan and focused on hard-to-reach communities. The goal was to communicate these resources with residents in the San Joaquin Valley. The first step of the outreach plan was to develop a website, a one-point location that anyone in the 8 San Joaquin Valley counties could look for help. A community member could go to this website, click on their county, and a list of resources would come up. Or they could even call a single phone number for that specific county and receive emergency water deliveries. Flyers, social media graphics, and ads in different sizes were developed. Blank areas were left on the marketing materials so that individual community partners could insert their logos to personalize the graphics. A sample press release and PSA were also developed so that any one of the partners could use them and share for distribution. The goal, one concise, uniform message by all of the partners in all of the 8 counties. These marketing assets were also developed in over 9 different languages, which are listed on the screen, so that we could reach all of the small communities within the San Joaquin Valley. Lastly, in closing, please help us share the message. If you know anyone who has run out of water or would like to find out more for yourself, please visit mywellwentdry.com or call 559-802-1685. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for that message, Elijah. And as he said, unfortunately, there are over 1,000 community members at the moment that have a water tank installed outside their house because their well went dry, and there isn't a drilling company available right now to drill for them. So fortunately, there are services available. Once again, I hope you never have to run out of water, but can you imagine what would happen if you did on this National Imagine a Day Without Water? We hope you enjoyed all of the presentations today, and thank you for bearing there with us as we made it through this lightning round. We wanted to give you a very quick concise message on all of the items that are the activities, research going on at Fresno State related to water. And you got everything from the sciences to the arts. And just one last message is the California Water Institute is doing crowdfunding for this month. As you saw, a lot of the information came from students working on research, and all of the background that you saw today, from the technical, the pinning, sharing screens, all of that was done by all of our students. So we would love for you to help us in our fundraising efforts to continue giving students these opportunities. And I'll put the link in the chat. And once again, thank you everybody for attending. We will share the recorded video with everybody that attended, and hope that you are able to join us in future showcases where we will update all of you on all of the current activities and research going on at Fresno State related to water. Thank you.